Hi, welcome everyone. It's wonderful to be hosting you in this virtual space for tonight's EDTalks. We are over halfway through our 10th season and we're so happy that you've joined us for our event tonight. My name is Adia Morris and I'm really excited to be with you as the event MC. I use she, her pronouns. Tonight, I'm coming to you virtually from Minneapolis, Minnesota, or Minnesota Makoche. This is the homeland of the Dakota people, and it's important for us to recognize that unless we're Indigenous Dakota, we're on stolen land, taken through an unauthorized and illegitimate treaty in 1805. We celebrate and honor the cultures and contributions of the original inhabitants of this land, who are such vital members of our community today. As we gather, I ask that you keep the history of this land in mind. I'm really excited to present tonight's two amazing speakers, Hannah Planalp and Janine Erickson. In her Ed Talk, Hannah will address the unique educational needs of fosters and how adults can support their transition from high school to college or careers. Jannine's talk centers Afrofuturist abolitionist wisdom in the creation of anti-racist third spaces where young people can develop and thrive. Super excited for both. But before we get going, I just want to give a few housekeeping items. First, a huge thank you to our generous sponsor, the Bush Foundation. Bush Foundation has supported this program for many, many years, and we're so grateful for their longtime partnership. We've pre-recorded both our talks for the event tonight to make sure that technology works smoothly. However, I'm really excited that both presenters are able to be online with us to participate in a live, real-time Q&A. That'll be at the end of the program, so be sure to stick around and also to be thinking of questions that you want to ask as you're listening to both speakers. I tend to take little notes, so you can just jot it down next to you or take a note on your computer so you don't forget. You can use the Q&A on the screen to submit those questions at any time throughout the event, so you don't even have to write it down. We will save up the questions for the end of the presentations, and we'll get to as many as we can. We're scheduled to end tonight at 8 p.m., but folks are willing to hang on just a little bit longer if we need more time to get to your questions. So you can also engage with social media during and after the event. You can use the hashtag EDTalksMN, that's capital E, capital D, capital T, and then capital MN. Finally, for tonight, the event is being recorded for our EDTalks video and audio libraries, which you can find on the EDTalks webpage at achieveminneapolis.org/EDTalks, otherwise known as achievempls.org/EDTalks. Without any further ado, let's get started. Our first speaker is Hannah Planalp. Hannah, who uses she, her pronouns. You might hear my child in the background, just gonna say. You're too loud. He's telling me I'm too loud. I'll be done in a minute, kiddo. Hannah uses she, her pronouns and leads the Fostering Education Initiative at Foster Advocates, which supports fosters in getting to and through post-secondary education. Hannah is a Korean adoptee from Glenwood Springs, Colorado, and knows firsthand the experience of being a foster, which is the source of her passion for supporting and amplifying foster voices. A graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, she brings experience in program development, grant writing, community advocacy, and evidence-based healthcare guidelines. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you, Adia. I can count 12 different places that I lived between the ages of 15 and 18. Even though I attended 3 different high schools during that time, school was a safe place where life felt closer to normal. This isn't an experience that's unique to me. We know that 34% of fosters have moved schools 5 or more times by the time they're 18, and 17% have missed more than a month of school. Today, I'd like to share videos from our foster leaders so that you can hear from them in their own words. Here's Abby.
My name is Abigail, but most people call me Abby. My foster care process started when I was 12 years old, as I was in and out of hospitals due to the abuse I endured at the hands of my biological mother and stepfather. During this time, I was forced to miss several long periods of middle and high school, resulting in a disrupted and deeply challenging school experience that made it difficult to catch up and keep my grades high. Despite all of this, school was a refugee and a place where I could just be Abby. I was able to read as much as I wanted, do Sudoku, and be a nerd. I finally entered foster care when I was 16 and worked hard to graduate. However, I only had a 2.5 GPA at my graduation from Dallas Cokato High School due to all the school I missed in my 9th and 10th year, even though I was a straight A student my junior and senior year. Like an ambitious senior, I applied to and was accepted at the U of M, Twin Cities, NDSU, and SDSU. I was set to go to the U of M, however, after calculating the tuition and cost of room and board, even with the help of financial aid and scholarships, I realized I couldn't afford it. I was short $3,200 per year, and I didn't have a parent who was saving for my college, nor did I have a parent who was willing to co-sign a loan. Being on my own, I felt I would drown if I went into debt with no one to help. Despite this, I never gave up on my dream of going to college. I applied and went to Ridgewater Community College. I figured I'd be able to save up, and once I finished an associate's degree in liberal arts, I could afford to go for a bachelor's in elementary education. While I'm thankful for this opportunity, it certainly wasn't what I had planned from the start. When I turned 18, my foster parents stopped getting state support for caring for me. I was in extended foster care, but this only paid for a third of what they had gotten accustomed to getting. I was told I needed to leave on my birthday and was given 30 days to find a new place to live. I am now living on my own and having to work 30 to 40 hours a week. As a result, I am only able to successfully complete 3 courses per semester. After talking with my advisor, I decided to change my career path to become a flight attendant so that I could get into the workforce sooner. This was just a long way of saying that I have had to alter my plans many times to accommodate for my financial struggle. While I'm still extremely excited to be a flight attendant and see the world, I would have loved to follow my original plan to be a teacher. I know I'm not the only child in foster care who has had to change their plans as a result of major setbacks. I'm also aware that we cannot get rid of all the life challenges foster kids face, but to allow them the same opportunities that other kids have only seems fair. Many of my friends receive help from their families, a support system us foster kids lack. We do not have someone to turn to during school breaks when you need a place to stay or to pay for college. We instead must apply for hundreds of scholarships and work overtime to even dream of attending school. Too often, for most foster kids, this is too much of a hurdle, which turns them away from further education outside of high school. I got lucky. I am getting a chance to go to Ridgewater part-time, and I am grateful to be a home health care aide. But it shouldn't come down to luck. I did everything right. Shouldn't the system do right by me too?
Like Abby, I love school, and I dreamed about going away to college. But I never thought that was attainable for me. I lived in a group home in Colorado, but what Abby and other Minnesota fosters tell us is not very different. Meeting my mentor, Alec, changed the course of my future. He connected me to college prep programs, encouraged me to apply to colleges, and helped make sure I was getting my basic needs met so that I could graduate from high school. Because of his persistence, I received a scholarship that paid for all of my college costs and went on to graduate with honors from UC Berkeley. Alec wasn't serving in any official capacity. He was not a social worker or advisor. He was just a supportive adult who set his mind to helping me get where I wanted to go. This quote is from Alicia, one of our foster leaders. I got lucky. Yes, I'm fully aware of how strange it sounds to consider oneself lucky despite all the challenges I've had to overcome so far, but I am. Many, too many, don't even have the small breaks or benefits in life that I did. I got a chance to go to college and deeply believe every foster youth should have access to a quality secondary education. We deserve a system in place that helps us through our journey. Like Alicia and Abby and many other fosters that go to college, I feel like I got lucky. But we believe fosters should not have to rely on luck to succeed. Every foster should be connected to the resources and relationships that allow them to follow the college and career pathway of their choosing. At Foster Advocates, we use fosters rather than foster youth or foster alumni. Early leaders in our network told us that regardless of whether they aged out of care, were adopted, or reunified with biological family, that the experience of foster care created a significant cultural identity, and that using foster was a way for them to name and claim this unique identity. To understand foster experiences, we have to understand foster identities. In Minnesota, Native youth are nearly 17 times more likely than white peers to enter foster care. Black youth are 2.6 times more likely, and those identified as having 2 or more races are about 6 times more likely. These are some of the worst racial disparities for foster care in the country. Based on our data and data we see from other states, we estimate that a third of Minnesota fosters identify as LGBTQ and Two-Spirit. This means that fosters who identify as the minority sexual orientation or gender identity are represented at 3 to 7 times the rate of the general population. So before we talk about college, who's graduating from high school? For all students, about 84% graduate in 4 years. For students in foster care during high school, about 41% graduate in 4 years. If we break those numbers down even further, Minnesota students that have ever been in foster care are less likely to graduate from high school than their peers that are homeless. Those that are currently in care in high school are even less likely to graduate. We think these numbers speak to the importance of supportive and caring relationships and the importance of safe and affirming housing. What are the alternatives for fosters? Right now, we see that 79% of fosters from Hennepin County experienced homelessness by age 24. And a Midwest study showed that by age 17, over half of fosters experienced an arrest or stayed in an overnight correctional facility. That was almost my story too. I had several interactions with law enforcement and the courts. I was cut off from support systems, sleeping on a friend's couch, and doing what I needed to survive. I was made to feel like a failure, and before ALEC, I didn't think anyone cared about my safety, let alone my success. These statistics and the stories we hear from fosters show that Minnesota is failing. We're failing to provide safe, identity-affirming, stable homes, and we're failing to provide a ramp to adulthood. If you care about racial equity, LGBTQ Two-Spirit identities, homelessness and incarceration prevention, then you should care about fosters. As educators, we need you to learn about barriers that fosters may be facing and recognize the power that you hold in helping fosters realize their potential. Here's Christian on his experience in high school.
My name is Christian Crump. I'm a foster and I was adopted at the age of 16. I attend Minnesota State University of Moorhead, where I'm currently double majoring in physical education and health with a minor in coaching. I want to be a teacher and a football coach because I had a great caring PE teacher and social worker while I was going to Wheaton High School. Upon graduation, I'll be the first in my biological family and third person in my adoptive family to receive a 4-year degree. Despite everything I've been through, I know that I've been very lucky. I have support from my adoptive mom, who is a guardian ad litem. This meant that she was very connected with the system. Because of this support, I'm pursuing the college path that I want, and I didn't have to delay my dreams. I was given this opportunity because I lucked out and basically won the lottery. I got placed in foster care and later was adopted by some pretty amazing parents. A lot of other kids out there never got or will ever get the same chance that I did. I believe it shouldn't be a question on if fosters can go to college or not. Finances should be available and the application process should be simplified so that fosters who don't have a mom like I did, who was a guardian ad litem and was ready to move mountains for me to get to college, still have the same access to financial support that I did. I don't know if I would have gone to college if I was never in foster care in middle school and if my adoptive mom wasn't in my life. It is not lost on me how much luck and random circumstance played a role in my journey. My story could be much different if just one thing didn't go right. I believe every foster deserves the same chance I got.
Despite the obstacles, what we hear is that over 80% of fosters want to go to college. But the reality is that only 3% of fosters are able to complete a degree by the time they're 24. This is a huge opportunity for us to make it easier for fosters to follow the path of their choosing. In 2020, these are the factors foster leaders listed when we asked about college barriers. They told us that the financial burden of meeting their basic needs means spending time at work when they would rather be focusing on school. They also felt that they didn't always know about college options or steps to take, or even who to go to with questions. This quote is from a foster aging out of care. I feel like I won't have enough to survive in the future. I feel like I won't have enough to succeed, but I'm trying my hardest to work and save money for college. My stress and anxiety have been very high since the start of COVID-19. It hasn't gone down. I want to do good, but I feel like I won't be able to. Fosters were already feeling vulnerable, and our research tells us that they are feeling the wide impacts of the pandemic even more than other young people. Basic needs shouldn't be left to luck, and every foster should be able to access higher education. So in 2021, considering the financial burden of higher education, they went to testify at the legislature. Here's ACE's testimony.
Like I said, my name is Antonia Goff, but my friends do call me Ace. And I'm here today to support the Fostering Higher Education Act. I entered foster care when I was just a baby because my birth mother was practically a baby herself at 14 years old. My grandparents struggled with alcoholism and were not able to care for me. I was placed into a foster home and was adopted by the age 6 by the same family. Unfortunately, that wasn't the happy ending that I had hoped for. My adoptive family changed after the state no longer was involved and when they weren't looking out for me. It would be too much to share all the details here, but just know that I did try to get out. I told adults in my life, and nothing really changed until high school. I knew at this point that nobody was coming to save me. And I knew that I was going to have to be my own superwoman. I started to run away, and the adults in my life started to notice. It may sound strange, but I honestly feel like I got lucky. I just happened to land in Judge Ireland's courtroom, and he started to ask the questions that nobody would, like why was I running away, and why was I in his courtroom so much? These questions led to investigations, which led to court, which finally led me entering into foster care. Again, while I was no longer facing abuse, foster care wasn't able to grant me the stability that most children were able to have. The instability moving from school to school made it hard for me to maintain my credits. This is when I realized that saving myself wasn't going to be enough. I was also going to need to raise myself. I advocated to stay at one high school and had to push to get a bus to be able to bring me to school. I was able to graduate from Fridley-Moore High School, and after graduation, I did what most folks told me that was impossible, especially for a foster like me. I entered the extended foster care system when I turned 18 and moved to St. Cloud, and now I'm getting my college degrees at St. Cloud State University. But even now, I can't focus on school. I worked 14 hours a week, and now I'm working in between 2 group homes. I am on my own, and I shouldn't have to be. The state told me that I was going to give me a better life twice. Parents are supposed to support their kids' dreams and hopes for the future. The state is my parent, so don't we deserve the same? Please support HF 1802, the Fostering Higher Education Act. Thank you.
Our testifiers knew that it may be too late for them to benefit from the bill, but they still did the work in the hopes that it might help someone else. Because ACE and others had an opportunity to share their stories, Minnesota passed the most comprehensive college support funding in the country. Full cost of attendance for anyone who is in foster care after the age of 13, regardless of whether they were adopted, reunified, or aged out of care. Visit our website for more information, and please share with everyone you know works with young people. We know that funding isn't everything. When you think back about your educational journey, when did your parents or supportive adults step in to help? Did you have someone to take you to visit a college campus, or someone to call when there was a problem you didn't know how to solve? So often, fosters are losing support when they age out of care, and we should be stepping in to fill the gaps. At Foster Advocates, we've launched a pilot leadership program for fosters in high school to close those gaps, but we're a small team, and fosters need and deserve to be uplifted by all of the people in their lives. If you support fosters in high school or younger, be sure to learn about what funding and programs exist for fosters. They may not have another adult in their lives who can spend time brainstorming the many options they have for college. Remember that the bill covers 2-year, 4-year, and technical and trade school, so they can figure out what works best for them. Start them thinking early and often about what college can look like. If a foster trusts you with their story, take time to listen. You may be the only adult who is checking in on them. The most meaningful thing that Alec did for me was just listening and asking questions. Keep in mind that they may not openly share their story. Be flexible whenever you can. I failed a class my senior year in high school because I promised a teacher I would get an assignment done when I missed class. I didn't do the assignment. I was preoccupied with work and finding a place to live, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her what was going on. I worried this would impact my admission to Berkeley, throwing all my plans out the window. I've worked with students who had to transfer to alternative schools because of grades or attendance, losing the supportive relationships they've built with friends and teachers. If possible, offer fosters flexibility in their commitments, knowing that they are experiencing things many of their peers are not. If you can, help connect them to resources. Alec connected me to a network of people and programs that were vital to my success. And finally, support them when you can. If you can review an essay or take a group to visit campus, it cements the idea that college is a realistic path for them. Too often, I hear stories of adults who tell fosters they aren't ready for college or should think about other options. Post-secondary education offers stability that fosters have not been able to have before, and we are confident that they will rise to the occasion. Here's Edson sharing what's on his mind as he gets ready to graduate.
The best thing that would have helped me focus on school would be having some help with money, transportation, all that stuff. Because the reason why, well, I'm not really focusing on school is because, well, I got other stuff to do. I'm trying to find a job. I'm trying to get a car, get my license, get all that stuff. So if I had some help with that earlier on, then it'd be easier because I wouldn't have to worry about that stuff when I'm in school. And my living situation at the moment is, well, I don't know. It's just not it. So, yeah. Also, if I had a tutor or somebody that could help me actually get on my stuff and work on my homework and do whatever I need to do, then it'll be way easier to focus.
I want you to consider everything Edson is getting done as he prepares for college and faces aging out of care. And I'd like you to think about, if you know a student like Edson, what you could do to help them get where they're trying to go. I'm not sure if Alec understands the impact he's had on my life. I still call him when I need advice or want to share a win. It meant so much to me that Alec chose to be an advocate for me and later others in similar situations. It showed me that he believed in me, and he approached me with empathy and support in a way that I hadn't experienced before. Now that we have the data on what's happening in Minnesota, everyone has a role in doing more to support fosters. We believe that these are solvable problems. So I'd like to challenge you as educators and members of the community to advocate for fosters in your schools and offer support whenever you get the opportunity. Because we know that when fosters are given the space and resources to breathe, they're able to thrive.
Thank you so much, Hannah. What an excellent presentation. So good to hear from all those fosters too. This is a quick reminder to submit your questions to our Q&A tonight. You can use that button. Somebody already did. Fantastic. You can use that button down in the toolbar as the questions pop up for you. We'll get to as many as we can at the end of the program. Next up is Janine Erickson. Jeannine, who uses she, her pronouns, serves as the Writers' Room Manager with 826 MSP, an arts education nonprofit which amplifies the voices of Twin Cities youth through free writing, tutoring, publishing, and leadership programs in schools, out of schools, and distance learning. She graduated from St. Catherine University with a degree in critical studies of race and ethnicity and French, which heavily influences her work and approach to education and writing. Take it away, Janine.
Thanks, Audia. Good evening. My name is Janine Erickson. I use she, her pronouns, and today we're going to have a really amazing conversation about anti-racism, loving accountability, and third space culture. Now, to ground tonight's event, I really want to quote and echo the wise words of one of my favorite educators, Dr. Bettina Love, and she says, "To love all children, we must struggle together to build the schools we are taught to believe are impossible. Schools built on love, justice, joy, and anti-racism." And for context, today, all the photos you'll be seeing are actual photos of my students, so please feel free to share some love for them in the comments. Again, Janine Erickson, she, her pronouns, and I currently serve as the Writers' Room Manager with the nonprofit 826 MSP. And my goals and hopes for today's conversation is really just to have a better understanding, or hopefully a strengthened understanding, about third space culture, what it is and what it isn't, and also the very important and crucial and integral role that loving accountability plays as well. So let's talk about space. So now you might be wondering, what does third space mean anyway? And I'm here to help, no worries. So if home is the first space or place and work or school is the second space or place, then third spaces by definition are anchors that transcend those two prior definitions. Now, again, if you're still kind of struggling, some third space examples could be Starbucks, the library, your car on your lunch break, maybe your friend's backyard. But for the purpose of today's conversation, I really want to focus on the definition from Wing Young Hui from the Third Place Gallery. And he says, if home is the first place and work is the second place, third places then by definition are anchors of community life that facilitate foster broader, more creative interactions. Now, I really want to echo the word anchor. Anchor meaning grounded, anchor meaning community driven and centered. That's the really important distinction I want us to take away, is that we're not here to just be at a Starbucks. We're here to foster community with one another. Now, in the wise words of my colleague, Korsha Hassan, she talks about the fact that often victims or people that are made to be victimized by oppressive systems are given the brunt or the fault of these systems that we are targets of. So she wrote a letter to our nonprofit shortly after George Floyd was murdered, and I'm going to echo those words that you see on the screen, which are as follows. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless Black bodies were murdered by a racist police system. They didn't choose to die, they were murdered. And just similarly, that Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Elijah McClain, Trayvon Martin, and countless other Black bodies did not choose to be murdered by a racist police system. Neither did our at-risk youth. At-risk youth, similar to Black and brown bodies in a racist police system and a racist society, do not choose to be at risk. They are made to be at risk and are marginalized by a racist education system. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about 826 MSP and the work that we do in the Writers' Room, which is my third space that we'll be talking about today. So the Writers' Room, as many know it, is a place to answer whiteboard prompts, maybe get a snack if we're allowing it, depending on COVID at the time, and also just a chance to have intentional conversations, get one-on-one tutoring, support with our wonderful volunteers, and also a place to gather. So how do we build these intentional third spaces? I'd argue the three pillars of third space should be, if you want to build an intentional one, are intentionality, sustainability, and representative or responsive programming. So one of the ways we did that shortly after starting the 2020-2021 school year, which was our distance learning year, was to analyze what language should we be using to build community with one another. So here are some tools that I would suggest you could potentially use in your spaces. The equity statement you see on the screen is as follows. Here in the Writers' Room, we believe that all are welcome here, that Black Lives Matter, that no human is illegal, and believe women. Now, that language on paper may just seem like words, but words have power and intentionality. Now, it's not just words on paper that are going to help us foster broader community. It has to be action as well. So another part, an integral part about third spaces, especially intentional third spaces, is our author visit series. So one of the first things I did as Writers' Room Manager in my first year in the role was ensure that our author visit series, which is an in-school field trip where we bring in local authors and artists from the Twin Cities community and pay them for their time to talk about the behind the scenes of the publishing and editing process. But however, even though we were bringing in these amazing authors and artists, none of them were representative of our student body. For context, South is a 60% BIPOC identifying and a 40% non-BIPOC identifying breakdown. So one of the first things I did was ensure that we were not only paying artists for their time, but ensuring that all the author visits from that point forward were only featuring and paying and compensating BIPOC identifying artists. Another aspect of the Writers' Room in our very intentional third space is this commitment to wellness and a holistic approach. So it's very easy, especially in the nonprofit sector, to relationship build with students and our stakeholders for a very transactional purpose or the objectives or the needs of the organization. As Writers Room Manager, I really wanted to ensure that we did not do that. So the Wellness Wednesday series was a series that we built in response and in preparation for the distance learning year last year, in an attempt to not only intentionally build relationships with students, but also approach learning and writing from a holistic and a wellness lens. Writing, as we all may know, is a very intimate and intensive practice. So it's very imperative for us to ensure that our students not only have the writing skills that they need to defend and advocate for their needs, but also the wellness to back it up as well. Now, why is it imperative that we have these third spaces? What is their function? What is the purpose that they serve? Well, as educators, as facilitators of community and people that hopefully want to build these classrooms, again, and echoing Dr. Bettina Love's words, we are taught to believe are impossible. We have to be the change in the classroom, first and foremost. So one of the other ways that we were ensuring that we were making an intentional third space when I first started in the role was the creation of the Writers Room Advisory Council, AKA RAC, all hands on deck if you're one of my RAC members in the audience. But its function and really the intentionality behind creating this Youth Leadership Council was, if we're going to build a space that's for students, by students, informed by students, how can we argue we're doing that if students do not have any autonomy or a seat at the table? That's simply inaccurate and that's simply unfair. So not only do we ensure that students had autonomy and were in the driver's seat, we also ensure that just like our authors and artists and our other stakeholders, they're being compensated for their labor, their voice, and their truth. And modeling the leadership we wanted to see not only in the adults in the education sector, but also the youth as well. And now I could go on and on and on about what the Writers Room means to me and why it's a valid space, but I'd rather leave that up to one of my former RAC members and colleagues and students, Chris Dominguez. Chris, take it away.
I'm Chris Dominguez, and I'm a part of the 826 MSP program. I'm really connected with this, with the Writers Room. That was really good. I felt really connected, and the environment was so pretty. The lights, and then the posters with inspirational quotes, and then pictures, and then all the colors. I really like the fact that the place was very safe, and Jeannine made that happen. Jeannine was working hard to facilitate everything, and then I was yes, go off. You did great. You're doing great. And I like how patient she is, within facilitating author visits, because that's with the author visits, that was really good. I enjoyed almost every author visit that I've been in. I don't know, I feel doing it always brings me joy. 826 MSP, that I really enjoyed being a part of the team. As I can say, Jeannine was a mentor to me, which is really I needed that. When I had to write my scholarship essays for college, or just college applications, she was there to help me. And I'm here, I'm in college, and I'm succeeding. College has been hard, but I'm succeeding. And it was just a really great experience.
Now, lastly, one of the last more amazing things about Third Spaces as a whole in the Writers Room and some of the projects we've been able to cultivate as a space is our Young Authors Book Project. It is a professional publishing project in partnership with various classes and teachers, where we work with publishers, illustrators, designers, and we publish a real book with 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds by the end of their school year. The project you see featured in the presentation is our most recent project, The Words Unburden Me, and it was a group of 15-year-old English language learner students with Miss Lalagi's class. And although they faced many challenges, the pandemic, maybe not wanting to be in the classroom, we still made a beautiful book together, and these photos are from our celebration. And if you're interested in supporting our young writers and our students, please feel free to scan this QR code, and that's a way that will take you directly to our book page. Now, we talked a lot about third spaces, more explicitly intentional third spaces. So where does loving accountability fall into this line? Let's talk about it. So in the wise and amazing words of another amazing Black educator, Angela Davis, when children attend schools that place a greater value on discipline and security than on knowledge and intellectual development, they are attending prep schools for prison. And I want to reiterate that last line. They are attending prep schools for prison. So it hopefully does not fall on deaf ears that obviously the school to prison pipeline is a very real and harmful institution that impacts educators, our students, and more explicitly our Black and brown educators and students. And one of the vehicles or tools we can use to distance ourselves and more ideally disrupt and dismantle carceral approaches to discipline in the school system is accountability. And I want to articulate here, accountability doesn't happen just by chance. It has to be implemented. Accountability is not a one and done situation. It's not an adults versus students, and it's not a hierarchy. It's very much a commitment to, this is how I want to build community with you, and this is how I want to come together. And speaking of accountability, I want to tell you a brief story about one of my favorite students, Abdouassa. So Abdouassa is one of the first students I got to work with in the writer's room. He's actually also from the Young Authors Book Project I just mentioned, Words Unburden Me. When I first met Abdouassa in his class, we told him and his peers we would be making a book together, to which he responded, nah, I'm not doing that. Needless to say, it was a bit of a journey with Abdouassa, encouraging him to get into writing, which is fair, right? Writing is not for everyone. It's not everyone's favorite pastime, so that was perfectly valid. And I remember, although he was slow to warm up to this space, he eventually came to love the writer's room, and apart from YABP, even came for his own writing, essay, support, and help. And I remember one time I was working with Abdouassa on a one-on-one conference, and he was just giving me a really weird energy, and he was being very rude and disrespectful to me, and I had to pause, and I turned to him and I said, Abdouassa, I really want to help you with this writing conference, and I really want to be in community with you, but I can't do that if you continue to use these harmful words against me. And he took a pause, and he took into consideration, and he said, I'm sorry, miss. And it could have ended there. It could have ended back in 2019 in the writer's room, pre-pandemic, but it didn't. Instead, fast forward to now, where in this photo you see he's 17 years old now. He still loves the writer's room. He's still a very avid member of our community. And now he's modeling the expectations and the leadership I hope to see in this space. So just to say that accountability doesn't have to be what it's often framed as, which is cancel culture. It can be a call in, it can be an invitation. And I just want to leave you here with these last two questions. What does loving accountability mean to you? And I also encourage you can either write about this because we are a writing org, or you could just reflect on it on your own time. But I want you to think about a time where you experienced a third space culture. Why was it important to you? And what did it mean to cultivating your own sense of identity or self or community? And I just want to, once again, thank you all so much for your time this evening. Thank you for my students if you're in the audience. Shout out to Chris Dominguez for his words earlier in the What the Writer's Room video means to you. And most importantly, thank you so much for all that we have learned as community and together. And if you're interested in learning more about third space culture, loving accountability, and more about the work we do at 826 MSP, please take a moment and use your QR code or your phone to access this document. And last but not least, I just want to give a sincere shout out to my students featured in the video, Chris Dominguez, Abdouassa, and also the students you see on these slides. I would not be the educator I am without their support and their guidance. And it's been such a privilege to work with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janine. Excellent presentation. Now is the time where you all get to ask your questions. I hope you've been thinking about them, jotting them down, and popping them into the Q&A button. Some folks, it looks like I put them in the chat, so I'll try to track those as well. But please do use the Q&A, it's a little easier to see it. I want to welcome Hannah and Jeannine back. They'll be live with us tonight on the Q&A and the videos. I also want to welcome Alicia Tovson. I hope I'm saying that your last name right, Alicia, who uses she, her pronouns to join us for this segment. Alicia joins us from Foster Advocates and is here to offer a personal perspective on being a foster in Minnesota. Please continue to send in your questions and we will get to as many as we can. But let's start right away with a question from Emily. Alicia, this one is for you. Alicia, are you there? I can't see you. There
yep,
you are.
I'm here.
Great. What's something that you know now that you wish you could have told your younger self?
Honestly, the main thing I can think of is just knowing that I can do it. I mean, I've been in foster care since I was 4 years old, in and out constantly, and I never thought there was any hope for me. I didn't think I was going to be able to do anything with my life. So if I could just go back and tell myself hey, you can do it, you're successful, all that, I think that's the main thing. And it's Thovson. My last name's Thovson.
Thovson, got it. Thank you. Thank you for the correction. I want to go to another question from Pashel or Pashel. How can folks become a volunteer or mentor to fosters? It's a question that actually came up for me too. It's like, how, as a non-educator, how can I help? And this can be answered by Hannah. Jeannine, you can weigh in. Alicia, you can weigh in too.
Yeah, I can take that one first. I think reaching out is the first thing to do. You know, we have not implemented a really formal mentoring program because you know, we want to make sure we're intentional about those relationships, knowing that if not properly implemented, they can be harmful. But we always look for ways to plug people into young people who have particular career interests, or whether that's, you know, one conversation for networking or a prolonged relationship. So yeah, please reach out. I can put my email in the chat.
Alicia, did you want to put in any thoughts in there? Anything that's occurred to you?
I mean, just honestly, if you are wanting to work with fosters, I just encourage everybody to do it. I feel like enough people, like not enough people are in the system to help us. That should be. I mean, half of my coworkers say that they don't want to do foster care because they would want to adopt all of the kids they take in. And I'm like, you are the perfect person to do foster care. So that's just all I have to say about that.
Thank you. I'm going to jump to a question from Emily that kind of ties the two talks together. This is for Jeannine. If money wasn't a factor, what would your dream program or space look like for young people in the foster community?
You said it's a question for me regarding the foster?
Yeah. Well, I think tying the two talks together, just thinking about the foster community in general.
I got you. I would say one of the biggest barriers, especially when it comes to education, is obviously resources. As a nonprofit, and unfortunately, given the fact that most nonprofits either intentionally or unintentionally perpetuate the nonprofit industrial complex, we often work in a deficit mindset. So trying my best not to rest there for too long, I would say it's just like more money means more programs, means more access, means more time, and like more meaningful programming. Obviously, one of the things I mentioned in the talk was when I talk about the pillars of third spaces is sustainability, intentionality, and responsive or representative programming. And there are really amazing authors and artists that I love to bring in, and frankly, paying them $200 would be a disservice to the work that they do. So just basically, yeah, donate, support students, especially I can only imagine we've had some limited experience. Exactly. Unfortunately, in this capitalist society, Emily, money is movement. But in terms of the writer's room's experience with like children experiencing or navigating the foster care system, I think we've only had one former author that is currently experiencing that. But no, I would say it's like that's the purpose that and the function that third spaces can offer to like this need. And even hearing from the one gentleman who I'm forgetting the name of, Hannah, I think it was Edson. Let me know if that's wrong. But when he was talking about tutors and just like a space to land, I think that's what I want the space to be. And that's very much the vision I constructed and built it with. And it's very much informed by my own desire to have that kind of safe space to land when I was in a student's shoes as well. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you. Hannah, this question is for you. Outside of meeting, and Alicia, I'm going to tack you onto that one too. Outside of meeting basic needs, what are some ways that foster caretakers, caseworkers, and program leaders do to facilitate and ensure youth feel safe, cared for, and valued?
Alicia, do you want to take that one first, or do you want me to do?
Oh, I can answer. I don't care. The main thing I would say is just being there and listening and not like invalidating feelings. I've known, like when I was in care, I lived in multiple homes and it was just a continuous pattern of my feelings not being validated because they didn't go through what I went through, or it's my mom, I need to love my mom. Like, so just really listening and not trying to push your beliefs onto the foster kid. I think that's really, really important because honestly, the stuff I was told by my foster parents and some of my social workers still impacts me today. And I'm 22 and it's still really hard to deal with. So I know I would have really appreciated that when I was in care.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Alicia. And I would add a couple minor things. One is like celebrate their wins. There aren't always people there to cheer them on when they get a new job or get accepted to school or graduate. Nobody can throw them a graduation party often. So like those things, just having someone to celebrate the success that they're having in light of everything else that they're dealing with. And then I think specific to sort of up to high school age, like the extracurricular activities that bring students a lot of joy oftentimes are the first services to get cut. Well, money, transportation, or whatever the case may be. So for people who work in, run those programs, like have flexibility around things like attendance. If not all of those boxes can be checked, I think having some leeway to still be able to participate in those activities around the people that you care about and that care about you is a really important stability piece.
And then I would like to say
yeah, go ahead.
About it. I mean, just even advocating for the kid who's in your care, I think is really important, because I mean, I wasn't listening to, so there's a lot of things I missed out on because I wasn't able to do, I didn't have money, I didn't have family. And if I was able to like participate in those things in school, I think it really would have benefited me. So just advocating to the school or any workers on what the child needs. It's important to like, it's important to make sure that everyone knows what's going on, because at least for me, it was really difficult sometimes to tell them like, hey, I'm going through this right now. So having your foster parent advocate for you is really helpful.
Thank you. Thank you both. Question from Jenny. When thinking of, and for Janine, when thinking of third spaces, how do you balance the value of being in community in person versus convenience? I think it's supposed to be convenience of online now that it has become more of a norm.
That is an excellent question. So actually, backtracking to the slide you saw about the language we created, our equity statement, that was actually created during our virtual year. So I echo your maybe your own personal frustrations, Jenny, about how do you balance space, right? Especially when we can't be in space with one another. And I'd argue that that's my point about this differentiation, that's a big word, between intentional and non-intentional third spaces, right? Is if my space can't exist on either a virtual or in-person platform, then in my opinion, I'm not doing it right. So what we really rely on in the writer's room, and what I really champion, and what I would say is a very integral part about intentional third spaces, is relationship building, right? And community. So community, especially in terms of accessibility, because frankly, not everyone can access in-person events. So if you want to be truly equitable when we're building community, there does have to be that balance, right? Is what is the brand? What is the context? What is the heartbeat, if you will, of the space you're trying to cultivate and build? So I'd say for me, it was, what is the writer's room and what does it mean to our students? And for a lot of our students, especially more explicitly our Black and Brown students, it was a place to feel safe. It was a place to see people that looked like them. It was a place to have conversations they weren't allowed, especially you all can remember what it's like to be a high schooler and having a lot of like big decisions to make in your life and not feeling necessarily respected by the adults that are supposed to be helping you navigate and forge that path, right? So for me, it's very much to the points that my peers and colleagues on this call have already mentioned, is treating youth with the autonomy and the respect that they deserve, and not in a very like transactional, problematic way. So I'd say it's just being in space, so we still had our author visits virtually, we still had our Wellness Wednesdays, we still had our RAC meetings weekly. And it was, instead of it being like, what's the product? It was, what do you need and how can I support you? And I think that's the important shift, right? Is moving away from this very white supremacist need to have like things and like tangible things, and more like, what is the heartbeat of this space we're trying to build with one another? So without going too much on a tangent much longer, that's how I would respond to that.
That's okay. Tangents are okay. Thank you. And kind of continuing in that same vein, when thinking of third place spaces, how do you balance? That's the same one. That's a different question. I want another question. I got to mark that as answer. Okay, this is from Salma. Jeannine, I would love to hear more about what loving accountability looks like in schools. How can educators cultivate this in their everyday practice?
Great question. And Salma is one of my former coworkers. So what's up, friend? Hi, bio. But actually, I think that's a great question. And I do want to be transparent. Although I identify as an educator, I am not functioning in a traditional classroom space. And I always like to voice that, because I do want to recognize, especially we're coming off the strike and all of the mixed emotions of the Minneapolis teaching strike, that I have a lot of autonomy that frankly, a lot of other educators do not have in their classroom. And I just want a lot of non-educators to recognize that. And I always want to articulate that before I answer that kind of question. But what I would offer is, for the writer's room, it's kind of like a community agreement. And this kind of even answers Jenny's question in a different way. But what I do in the space and why I'm so integral about like modeling leadership, not only as a person that helps to cultivate the space, but also having that youth leadership at both a macro and a micro level, is to that point of, if I'm going to ask anything of you as an adult or as a community member, A, if I don't have a relationship with you, why would I be asking you that question? And B, it's just understanding that like we're in community together. So what does that mean? And how do we come together? And what are the demands of that? So when I talk about language and I talk about accountability, and this more explicitly loving accountability, it's really just a way to be like, I know that you can rise to this occasion and I will give you a chance to rise to the occasion. And if it becomes a pattern and you show me you cannot rise to the occasion, that is the point at which we kind of pivot and go like, okay, what needs to change for you to succeed and thrive and feel like you can be a participatory member of this community? But what I want to emphasize is that it is not suspension, it is not expulsion, and it is not, unfortunately, what a lot of zero tolerance policies are. That is saturated in schools. What this is not is just like, it's just not that. And I do want to be clear about that. And what I will also offer too is this model won't work and accountability won't work if you don't have relationships with people. So if you're not humanizing and intentionally, not just transactionally building relationships with your students, frankly, this model will not work, because it isn't about doing what works in a very like, unfortunately, school to prison pipeline model of this is what we need to get done. And I think, Sama, you know this, and other educators hopefully know, is like the step one is like knowing your name, and step two is saying it appropriately, right? I would say step three is remembering like, hey, how did that basketball game go? Or like, how is your sister? Or how is your nephew? Or did you do well in the job interview? And it's like to the points that even our colleagues Hannah and Alicia mentioned about like celebrating the wins. So if you're only holding people accountable and not actually celebrating when they've risen to the occasion, that's the important piece. But I would say it's a step-by-step process. It's a consistent process. And it is, as many educators on the call know, it is a labor of love. So it is not going to be a one and done. It has to be upheld, and it cannot be upheld just for one student. It has to be upheld for all your students, not just certain ones. So I would say that.
Thanks, Janine. And while we have you, will you reiterate that second question from the reflection question from your slide? Do you remember, can you give us
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Second one. So
yeah.
Basically the question was, if you have ever encountered a third space, something similar to the writer's room, what did it mean to you? And what did it mean to cultivating your own sense of self or identity, is essentially the premise of the question.
Excellent. So I want to ask you all of our panelists, what was that space for you if you had it? And if you didn't, what would you have wanted it to look like? I'll give you a second to think, so you don't have to just immediately answer.
I guess I can go. I think when I was at least in high school, the third space for me was a restaurant that I did work at, but the network of people there that were uplifting me, that were checking in on me, you know, they weren't providing services. They were just there to be supportive and listen and, you know, hear me out when I needed that. And I think for me, the care that came out of those relationships, because it wasn't grounded in any, it's your job to support me in this way. It was just about the relationships that were building with me and freedom to kind of engage with them how I wanted to.
Yeah, I would say I'll go next. When I was in school, once everyone found out kind of what my situation was, I had a lot more families like being really open and accepting of me. Specifically, one family of a friend that I had, I mean, they had me come over and celebrate Thanksgiving, Christmas, like they celebrated my birthday. They even got me a cake for graduation because I wasn't able to do any of that. So I just really appreciated it. Or if I was having any issues with my foster parents, they had a room for me. So I was sleeping there. So that was really like my safe space.
Thank you for that, Alicia and Hannah. I really want to iterate what Hannah said, where it's like, just because it doesn't fit this perfect, beautifully constructed definition of what third spaces should and shouldn't be in the way I presented my presentation doesn't mean it can't be that. I would say for me, what really inspired me to run the writer's room the way I did it was my experience at St. Catherine University. I do have some of my former fellow Katies on the call, so what's up, St. Case people. But what I will say is the Center for Women in the MIPS office, which is the Multicultural International Programs and Services office, it was two spaces where in a very white institution, I found my footing and I found sisterhood. And especially given the fact that education, especially in the state of Minnesota, is historically and predominantly white and tends to center white voices. So I think that in and of itself just really showed me what it means to be a leader, especially at a women's institution, for context, and to kind of decolonize not only my own assumptions and biases of what a leader should and shouldn't be, but also it really allowed me to step into the woman and the leader and the educator that I am. And I wouldn't be that person, I think, if it wasn't for more explicitly the women of color that fostered spaces that I still take tips from and implement into the writer's room, like the whiteboard prompts, the offering menstrual products, the relationships, the conversations I'm having. It's all very much inspired when I was on the other side of that chair and when I was very much in my students' shoes. So it's all very much me paying it back because I would not be who I was without them. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for those answers. And thank you for your great questions, everyone in the audience who asked a question. If you still have one, you better ask it quick because we're about to wrap up. But I've got some information for you, and I think that there are ways to connect with our presenters that I'll talk about in a little bit. But once again, I just want to thank our presenters, Hannah and Jeannine. And I want to thank Alicia for joining us for the Q&A. Thank you so much for your openness. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for inspiring all of us. We have 2 more amazing Ed Talks to round out our season and invite you to save the date for April 26th. This event features 4 young speakers, Walter Cortina from Bridgemakers and Kira Hughes-Bester, Jamia Cusick, and Octavius Doe. I should have asked before we started how to say these names. If you're here and I have butchered that, feel free to correct me. Jamia Cusick and Octavius Doe, St. Paul Youth Services, Youth Power, Minnesota. Keep an eye on your email for more information to come. We'll be sending links to tonight's video recordings and great resources suggested by our presenters later on this week. One goal of Ed Talks is ongoing learning and action. So we hope you check out these resources and find ways to get involved in these and other education-related issues. So you can see the questions up on the screen. That's what we're talking about if you have those. We'll also share the link to our full Ed Talks library. With 9+ seasons under our belt, there's so much to explore, so many great talks, and some of them I can still remember. If you can't wait for the email, visit our website at achieveminneapolis.org/edtalks for the video library. You can also search for Ed Talks Minnesota at soundcloud.com for the podcast collection. Thanks again to our generous funder, the Bush Foundation. They make Ed Talks possible. We also encourage you to connect with our event partners, Achieve Minneapolis and Citizens League, to learn about all the things they're doing in our community, all the awesome things, and how you can get connected and engaged. Check out their websites on our screen. And on behalf of the Ed Talks team, I want to express our deep gratitude to all of you for joining us tonight. Thank you for your attention and your time as we're all in this pandemic tail end, hopefully, period. Have a good night and take care.